The maintenance bay of Station Kepler 442 was always noisy. Different alien machines made different sounds. Some whistled. Some clicked. Some made sounds that humans could not even describe. But today the bay was getting quieter and quieter. Hyunwoo Kim did not notice at first. He was too busy working on a broken machine. The blue alien who brought it said the machine was making death sounds instead of happy sounds. To Hyunwoo, it just sounded broken. He had been working on fixing things for 3 years now. Most alien machines were not that different from human machines. They just looked strange. Hyunwoo was one of only 12 humans working on the big space station. The station was like a city in space where many different aliens came to trade and do business. Most aliens thought humans were interesting but not very smart. Humans were new to space travel. They had only met aliens 15 years ago. Because human technology was simple, humans mostly did basic jobs like fixing things and cleaning. But Hyunwoo was good at his job. He was not afraid of alien machines like other humans were. When something was broken, he would touch it and try to understand how it worked. He would take it apart and put it back together until it worked again. This saved the station a lot of money because they did not need to call expensive alien experts. As Hyunwoo worked, he noticed that all the talking in the bay had stopped. The clicking sounds from the bug-like aliens stopped too. Even the bird-like aliens who always made noise were quiet. This was very strange. Hyunwoo looked up from his work to see what was happening. Every alien in the maintenance bay was looking at the main door. Their faces showed fear. Some of the smaller aliens had hidden behind big machines. Then Hyunwoo saw what they were looking at. A huge creature walked into the bay. It was taller than 3 humans standing on top of each other. It had orange skin that looked like metal scales. The scales seemed to glow with their own light. The creature had big wings folded against its back. It had 2 small arms near its chest and 2 big legs. Its head looked like a dragon from old Earth stories. Its mouth was full of teeth that could bite through steel. Its eyes glowed like fire. Hyunwoo had heard stories about these creatures in the station bars. They were called orange dragons. Most aliens were too scared to talk about them. The few stories Hyunwoo had heard said they were the most dangerous beings in space. They could destroy whole fleets of ships with their breath. They could turn planets into dust. The dragon looked around the maintenance bay with its burning eyes. It looked at every scared alien until its eyes found Hyunwoo. The human was standing there with a tool in his hand, looking more curious than scared. The dragon began walking toward Hyunwoo. Each step made the floor shake a little. All around them, aliens pressed themselves against walls or hid behind machines. One crystal alien started flashing lights in what looked like a prayer. Hyunwoo put down his tool and waited. There was nowhere to run even if he wanted to. But he was not really scared. He was more interested than anything else. The creature was beautiful in a way. It reminded him of the dragon stories his grandmother used to tell him when he was little. The orange dragon stopped just a few steps away from Hyunwoo. The human could feel heat coming from its scales. It looked at him with intelligent eyes. Its big head moved to one side like it was confused by what it saw. Then something amazing happened. The dragon spoke in perfect space language. "You are not afraid," it said. It was not asking a question. It was saying what it saw. Hyunwoo lifted his shoulders in the human gesture that meant he did not know. The dragon seemed to understand this because its eyes got smaller like it was amused. "Should I be afraid?" Hyunwoo asked. "I mean, you have not threatened me or anything. You were just standing there." The dragon made a sound that might have been laughing if laughing could shake the walls. "Every other being in this bay thinks I'm about to turn you into dust." "Are you going to do that?" Hyunwoo asked. "Not right now, no." "Then I guess I will keep not being afraid." The dragon moved its head closer to Hyunwoo. The human could smell something like hot metal. "What are you, little creature?" "I am human. Hyunwoo Kim is my name. I fix things. Third-class maintenance specialist." He pointed at the half-fixed machine behind him. "Right now I'm trying to figure out why this thing sounds like it is dying instead of purring like it should." For several long seconds, the only sound in the bay was the quiet hum of the air systems. Then the orange dragon did something that would become a legend told all across the galaxy. It held out one of its smaller arms toward Hyunwoo. Its clawed hand was open in a clear gesture of greeting. "I am Taemin of the Seventh Flame. It is good to meet you, Hyunwoo Kim." Hyunwoo did not hesitate. He reached out and took the dragon's hand in his own. He shook it firmly like humans do when they meet someone new. The dragon's scales felt warm and smooth like polished stone that had been heated. The sound that came from the watching aliens was impossible to describe. Some screamed. Some fainted. A robot alien actually broke down completely. Its metal body fell over with sparks flying everywhere. But Hyunwoo and the dragon did not pay attention to the other aliens. They were having what seemed like a normal conversation between two people who had just met. "So," Hyunwoo said, still holding the dragon's hand, "what brings one of the most feared creatures in the galaxy to a maintenance bay on a trading station?" Taemin's laugh was more friendly now instead of scary. "Machine problems, actually. My ship's air system has been making sounds I have never heard before. The station's chief engineer looked at my ship and said it was beyond normal repair methods." "Ah." Hyunwoo nodded like he understood completely. "Did he say it sounded like it was dying?" His exact words were that it was screaming in technological pain. "Yes, that sounds like a Vorthan air processor. Same model that has been giving me trouble all day." He finally let go of the dragon's hand and pointed toward his work area. "Do you want me to look at it? Fair warning, though, I will probably have to make things up as I go. Human engineering is more about trying things until something works instead of following the manual exactly." The dragon's eyes got brighter with what was definitely amusement now. "I find myself curious about your methods. Please lead the way, Hyunwoo Kim." As the human and the dragon walked out of the maintenance bay together, talking about air processors and machine repair, they left behind a bay full of aliens who could not believe what they had just seen. The most feared predator in known space had just made friends with a human maintenance worker, and the human had treated the whole thing like it was the most normal thing in the galaxy. In the far corner of the bay, a young bird-like alien turned on its communication device with shaking hands. This was the kind of story that would spread through the station in an hour and across the galaxy in days. The age of humanity was about to become very interesting. The walk to the private ship area where Taiman kept his ship should have taken 10 minutes. But it became something like a parade of terror instead. As soon as an orange dragon started walking through the busy shopping area of the station, everything changed. Shop owners slammed their metal doors shut. People walking around dove behind flower pots and benches. A group of young bug aliens made a circle around their mother, clicking their mandibles in what Hyunwoo knew was a fighting formation. Taemin seemed to not notice the chaos he was causing. Instead, he was busy explaining how his ship's air systems worked. Hyunwoo found himself really interested in what the dragon was saying about plasma tubes and space-stable life support systems. "The interesting thing about our ships," Taemin was saying as they passed a fountain where 3 different types of aliens were hiding, "is that they are grown rather than built. The air systems are actually living tissue that has been changed to process atmosphere." Living tissue. Hyunwoo stopped walking. This made a robot diplomat crash into a trash can because it was trying so hard to get out of their way. "That is incredible. How do you fix biological systems when they break?" "Very carefully, and usually not very well, which is why I was told to find outside help." The dragon's head tilted slightly. "Your people approach technology differently than most. The station chief mentioned that humans have a reputation for unusual solutions. We call it making things work with whatever we have available." Hyunwoo smiled. "Sometimes that means using a big welder when you need a small laser, or connecting a plasma tube with spare parts from 3 different companies." They started walking again, passing a section where a whole market had decided to close early. Sellers were quickly packing their things while looking nervously at the dragon. "Tell me about your people," Taemin said suddenly. "The information I can find through normal channels is very limited. That is because we are new mostly. We only made contact with galactic civilization about 15 years ago, and most of that time we have been trying to catch up." Hyunwoo thought about how to explain humanity to a being that was like a living legend. "We are curious, I guess, and stubborn. When something does not work the way it should, we keep trying different things until it does work. And you are not easily frightened. Some of us are scared easily, but fear does not really help when you are trying to fix something, you know? If you are scared of the machine, you cannot understand how it works." They had reached the private ship section, where the more expensive ships were kept. Taemin's ship was easy to spot, not just because it was big, but because every other ship had parked far away from it. The closest ship was at least 50 meters away, like its owner was afraid that whatever the dragon had might be contagious. The ship itself was beautiful. Hyunwoo had seen many alien ships, but this was completely different. Instead of the sharp manufactured look of most spaceships, Taimin's ship looked like it had been carved from living metal. Its surface was a deep bronze color that seemed to move and flow in the light. Organic-looking tubes were visible under its see-through hull. "It is beautiful," Hyunwoo said, and he meant it. "Thank you. She was grown specifically for me, bred from a mix of traditional dragon ship genetics and more modern technology." Taimin placed one clawed hand on the ship's hull, and Hyunwoo could swear the ship responded with a soft pulse of light. The air systems are located in what you might call the heart chamber. As they got closer to the ship's boarding ramp, Hyunwoo noticed they had an audience. Station security people were staying what they thought was a safe distance, while trying to look like they were not watching every move the dragon made. A few brave people had even turned on recording devices, though they were being careful to keep them hidden. "Popular guy," Hyunwoo said. "My people have a certain reputation." Taimin's voice was dry. "Most beings prefer to watch us from far away. Your willingness to come close has been refreshing." The inside of the ship was as amazing as the outside. The hallways were curved and organic, with a warm amber light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air smelled like the same heated metal scent that surrounded Taimin, but stronger and somehow more comfortable. "The heart chamber is this way," the dragon said, leading him deeper into the ship. "I should warn you that the systems here are quite different from anything in your technical databases." "Different how?" "They are alive, for one thing, and they respond to emotional states as much as mechanical input." They entered a round room that took Hyunwoo's breath away. The walls were covered in what looked like a combination of circuits and nervous tissue, pulsing with soft light and complex patterns. At the center of the room stood something that might have been a control console if control consoles were grown from crystal and dragon scales, and it was definitely making sounds it should not be making. The noise was a mix of grinding, squealing, and what could only be described as whimpering. Even without understanding the biology involved, Hyunwoo could tell the system was in pain. "When did this start?" he asked, moving closer to examine the biomechanical hybrid. 3 days ago. It began as a slight problem in the breathing cycle, then got worse to these distress sounds." Hyunwoo knelt beside the console, studying the patterns of light and the rhythm of the organic parts. "Has anything changed recently?" "New routes, different fuel, exposure to unusual energy sources. Nothing significant. We passed through the Helix Nebula 2 weeks ago, but that is a standard navigation route." Hyunwoo reached out slowly, letting his hand hover just above the surface of the biotech hybrid. To his surprise, the distress sounds got quieter. "It is responding to presence." "That is interesting." He placed his palm gently against what looked like a sensor node. The whimpering stopped completely, replaced by a sound almost like purring. "Remarkable," Taimin breathed. "It has not responded to my touch in days." "Different body chemistry, maybe." Hyunwoo kept his hand in place while studying the rest of the system. "Our people produce different chemicals, different electrical fields. Sometimes that is enough to calm a stressed system." He spent the next several minutes examining the living machinery, asking questions about how it normally worked and what had happened recently. What he found was a system that was basically having a panic attack. "The Helix Nebula," he said finally. "You said you passed through there 2 weeks ago. What kind of energy patterns did you encounter?" "Standard stellar radiation, some interference from the nebula's magnetic field. Nothing unusual." "But something your ship had not experienced before?" Taimin's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Actually, yes. The nebula has been more active recently due to gravitational interactions with a passing rogue planet. The energy patterns were more complex than usual, and your ship's air system is partially biological, which means it can develop something like post-traumatic stress from exposure to unfamiliar stimuli." Hyunwoo grinned. "Your ship is not broken, Taimin. It is just nervous." The dragon stared at him. "You are suggesting that my vessel is experiencing psychological distress?" "That is exactly what I am suggesting. And I think I know how to fix it." What happened next would become another part of the legend that was already spreading through the station's communication networks. The human maintenance worker, showing no concern for the fact that he was dealing with technology worth more than most planets make in a year, began to basically perform therapy on an alien spaceship. Hyunwoo kept one hand on the sensor node while speaking in calm, soothing tones to the living systems around them. He explained what the Helix Nebula was, why its energy patterns had been unusual, and that there was no ongoing danger. He described the safety of the station, the familiar rhythms of normal space traffic, and the routine nature of their current situation. "Listen to me," Hyunwoo said softly to the biomechanical system. "You went through something scary, but you are safe now. The strange energy you felt in the nebula was just a natural thing that happens sometimes, like a storm but in space. The storm is over now." The dragon watched in amazement as the human continued talking to his ship like it was a frightened animal. "You are docked at a peaceful trading station," Hyunwoo continued. "There are thousands of ships here, all safe and calm. You can feel their engines humming peacefully nearby. There is no danger here. This is a place where ships rest and get repaired." Gradually, the distress sounds from the ship's systems began to fade. The pulsing lights settled into steady, healthy patterns. The biomechanical hybrid began to emit the soft purring sound that meant everything was working properly. "There we go," Hyunwoo said softly, giving the sensor node a gentle pat like he might pet a cat. "All better?" Taemin was staring at him with an expression that might have been awe. "In all my centuries of life, I have never seen anyone communicate with ship systems the way you just did. Different approach, I guess. Humans are pretty social creatures. We are used to dealing with anxiety and stress even in ourselves." Hyunwoo stood up, wiping his hands on his work clothes. "Your ship should be fine now. If the symptoms come back, try talking to it. Explain where you are and where you are going. Tell it that everything is okay. I will remember that." The dragon moved closer, and Hyunwoo realized that this was probably going to become another legendary moment. "You have done me a great service, Hyunwoo Kim. How can I repay you?" Hyunwoo thought about this seriously. He was standing in the heart of a dragon ship, having just performed counseling services on alien biotechnology, talking to one of the most feared beings in the galaxy. The normal answer would be to ask for money or rare materials or passage to some distant world. Instead, he said, "Tell me about your people. The real story, not the legends." Taemin's laugh filled the heart chamber with warmth. "That, my friend, would take much more time than we have today. But perhaps, would you be interested in joining me for a meal? I find myself curious about human perspectives on many subjects." "I would like that. Fair warning, though, I'm going to have a lot of questions. I would be disappointed if you did not." As they made their way back through the ship toward the exit, neither of them noticed the small recording device that had been carefully placed near the heart chamber's entrance. The conversation between the legendary orange dragon and the human maintenance worker was already being sent to interested parties throughout the galaxy. The story was spreading faster than either of them could have imagined. When they reached the ship's exit ramp, they found that their audience had grown larger. More station security personnel had arrived. Several important-looking aliens in expensive clothes were also watching from what they considered safe distances. Some had recording equipment that was not even hidden anymore. "Looks like we are popular," Hyunwoo said as they walked down the ramp. "My presence tends to attract attention," Taemin replied, "usually the kind of attention that involves evacuation procedures and emergency protocols. But not this time. Not this time. You have made this interaction different." As they walked back toward the main part of the station, Hyunwoo could see the changes their friendship was already causing. Aliens who had been hiding were now peeking out to watch them pass. Some were even following at a distance as if they wanted to see what would happen next. The dragon ship behind them had also changed. Where before it had sat alone with other ships parked far away, now a few curious vessels had moved slightly closer. Not close enough to be considered brave, but closer than before. "I think," Hyunwoo said as they walked, "that fixing your ship was the easy part." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I think we might have started something bigger than just repairing a nervous air system." Taemin looked around at the watching aliens, the recording devices and the slowly changing dynamics of the station around them. "Yes," he said thoughtfully. "I believe you may be right." They had reached the main corridor that led to the commercial district. Here the effects of their friendship were even more obvious. Shops that had closed when the dragon arrived were slowly opening again. Aliens who had hidden were cautiously returning to their business. But everyone was watching them with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. "Are you worried about all this attention?" Hyunwoo asked. "Should I be?" "I do not know. I have never been friends with a legendary space predator before, and I have never been friends with a human maintenance worker. I suppose we will figure it out together." As they continued toward the restaurant district, their conversation was being recorded by dozens of devices. Their words were being translated into hundreds of languages and transmitted to governments, news organizations, and intelligence agencies across the galaxy. But Hyun-woo and Taimin were not thinking about galactic politics or the implications of interspecies friendship. They were simply two individuals who had found something rare and valuable, someone interesting to talk with. "So," Hyun-woo said as they approached the Stellar Lounge, one of the station's nicer restaurants, "what do dragons eat anyway?" "That," Taimin replied with amusement, "is about to become another interesting experiment." The maitre d' at the Stellar Lounge, a crystalline being whose job it was to seat important guests, saw them coming and immediately experienced what could only be described as a complete system crash. The poor creature simply stood there, flickering between different colors of panic, while its translator tried to process a situation that clearly fell outside its programming. "Good evening," Taimin said politely, as if having a 3-meter-tall legendary predator request dinner seating was the most normal thing in the galaxy. "Table for 2, please." And somehow that simple request was about to change everything. The Stellar Lounge was one of Station Kepler 442's fanciest restaurants. It served diplomats, wealthy traders, and other beings who liked their meals with a side of social status. It was not the kind of place where maintenance workers usually ate, and it was definitely not the kind of place that had ever hosted an orange dragon. When Taemin and Hyunwoo arrived at the entrance, the crystalline creature who seated guests suffered what could only be described as a complete breakdown. The poor being just stood there, its crystal body flickering between different colors of distress while its translator struggled to understand a situation that was clearly not in its programming. "Reservation for 2, Taemin said pleasantly, as if having a 3-meter-tall legendary predator request dinner seating was perfectly normal. We," the host managed, its colors now cycling rapidly through what Hyunwoo recognized as the crystalline equivalent of a panic attack. "Perhaps a private dining room would be more comfortable," Hyunwoo suggested gently. For everyone involved, the suggestion seemed to restart the host's thinking processes. "Yes, private room. Absolutely. Right this way, honored guests." They were led through the main dining area, which became completely silent as they passed. Hyunwoo could feel hundreds of eyes following their progress, and he was pretty sure at least a dozen recording devices were capturing every step. The whispers started before they were even halfway across the room. "Is that really an orange dragon? Why is nobody dead? Who is the human with it? Should we evacuate?" The private dining room was a relief after walking through all that staring. It was nicely decorated with a view of the station's central hub, and more importantly, it had walls that blocked out the constant watching. "This happens a lot, does it not?" Hyunwoo asked as they sat in chairs that had clearly been quickly changed to fit Taiman's size and wings. "Everywhere I go," the dragon confirmed. "My people have worked very hard to build our reputation over thousands of years. It serves us well in most situations, but it does make casual dining rather challenging." A service robot arrived with menus moving in quick, nervous patterns that suggested its computer brain was having trouble understanding the situation. Hyunwoo took pity on the machine and ordered something simple from the human-compatible section. Taemin requested what appeared to be enough thermal energy to power a small reactor, delivered in food form. "So," Hyunwoo said once they were alone again, "tell me about the reputation. What is the real story behind the legends?" Taemin was quiet for a moment, his burning eyes focused on something beyond the window. "We are an old species, very old. We were exploring the galaxy when most of the current civilizations were still discovering fire. Over time, we learned that being feared was often more useful than being understood." "Useful how?" "Fear prevents conflicts. If every species in the galaxy believes that making one orange dragon angry will result in the complete destruction of their home world, they tend to be very polite when they meet us." Hyunwoo thought about this, but that means you are all basically living alone. Everyone is too scared to actually get to know you. Exactly. There was something almost sad in Taemin's voice. "It is an effective strategy for keeping peace, but it comes at a considerable personal cost." Their food arrived, delivered by a parade of service robots that moved in perfect coordination to spend as little time in the room as possible. Hyunwoo's meal looked like normal food. Taemin's appeared to be a collection of crystal structures that glowed with internal heat. "What about your ship?" Hyunwoo asked. watching with fascination as the dragon ate what looked like edible lava. The biotechnology, I mean. That is not standard for most species. Our ships are partners rather than tools. They are grown from modified dragon genetics, designed to work with our specific needs and abilities. Taemin paused in his meal. What you did today, communicating with the environmental systems, that is actually closer to how we normally interact with our vessels. You approached it as a living entity rather than a machine, because that is what it was, partially anyway. Hyunwoo took a bite of his own meal, which was surprisingly good. Humans have a tendency to see human-like qualities in things. We see patterns and behaviors that remind us of ourselves, and we respond accordingly, even when dealing with completely alien technology. Especially then. The more unfamiliar something is, the more we try to find common ground. It is how we make sense of things that do not fit into our existing understanding of the world. Taemin's eyes glowed brighter with interest. That is a remarkably useful trait. Most species approach the unfamiliar with caution, following established protocols and safety procedures, which probably keeps them alive more often than our approach does, Hyunwoo admitted. But it also means they miss opportunities to understand things in new ways. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both thinking their own thoughts. Outside the window, the normal activity of the station continued. Ships arriving and departing, cargo being moved around, the endless dance of space commerce. But Hyunwoo could see subtle changes in the patterns. Ships were keeping greater distances from each other. Foot traffic in the visible corridors was noticeably lighter. Word of the dragon's presence was clearly spreading, and it was affecting the entire station's operations. This is going to cause problems, is it not? He asked. Taemin followed his gaze to the window. Some. Station administrators tend to become nervous when my kind appears without advance notice. They worry about economic disruption, security concerns, diplomatic incidents. Are those reasonable concerns? Not usually. But fear rarely responds to rational thinking. As if called by their conversation, a soft chime indicated an incoming communication. The wall display turned on to show the somewhat worried face of Station Administrator Wei-Jin Park, whose expression suggested he was having the worst day of his career. Orange Dragon Taemin, Wei-Jin said with the careful politeness of someone trying very hard not to accidentally start a war between species. I am Administrator Park. I wanted to personally welcome you to Station Kepler 442 and make sure that your stay has been comfortable. Quite comfortable, thank you, Taemin replied. Your maintenance staff is particularly skilled. Wei-Jin's eyes moved to Hyunwoo and his expression shifted to confusion. I took maintenance staff? Hyunwoo Kim resolved a complex technical issue with my vessel's environmental systems. His approach was both innovative and effective. The administrator's confusion deepened. Kim? But he is just a third-class maintenance specialist. Surely a being of your importance would prefer to work with our senior engineering staff. I prefer to work with competent individuals regardless of their official job title, Taemin said, and there was just enough edge in his voice to make Wei-Jin visibly uncomfortable. Mr. Kim demonstrated both technical skill and remarkable insight. Of course. I meant no disrespect. Wei-Jin was clearly out of his depth and trying not to show it. Is there anything else the station can provide for your comfort? Security escort, priority services, diplomatic protocols? I require no special treatment. I am simply a traveler in need of repairs and supplies. After a few more minutes of awkward conversation, Wei-Jin ended the communication. Hyunwoo could practically feel the relief coming through the connection. You did not have to do that, he said. Do what? Defend me to the administrator. I really am just a maintenance worker. Taemin's expression was unreadable. You solved a problem that had confused me for days using methods I had never considered in a matter of minutes. Your job classification is irrelevant. Most beings would not see it that way. Most beings approach problems with ideas about what solutions should look like and who should be qualified to implement them. The dragon leaned forward slightly. Your species appears to be less limited by such thinking. Or maybe we are just too new to know what the limitations are supposed to be. Perhaps. But I suspect there is more to it than that. As they finished their meal, Hyunwoo realized that something fundamental had changed, not just between him and Taemin, but in the wider galaxy. Their simple friendship was already sending ripples through established systems of fear and protocol. The question was, what would happen next? The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council happened at 0347 Standard Time. It was called by the robot representative, who had watched the first handshake in the maintenance bay. The holographic meeting room appeared around delegates from 23 major civilizations, all of whom had been woken up by urgent alerts about a possible change in galactic power structures. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka represented Earth's interests at these meetings, though she rarely had much to say. Humanity was still considered a minor species, useful for manual labor and fixing things, but hardly a major player in space politics. She had thought this emergency session would be about some trade dispute or territory conflict that did not involve her people at all. She was wrong. The footage is clear, the robot representative was saying, its artificial voice carrying tones of what might have been panic if machines could panic. A human worker not only approached an orange dragon without fear, but talked with it casually and made physical contact. The holographic display showed the security recording from the maintenance bay, zoomed in on the moment when Hyunwoo had shaken hands with Taimin. Several delegates made sounds of distress as they watched. This could represent a complete shift in the balance of power, continued the robot representative. If humans can communicate with orange dragons, if they can form alliances with them, one maintenance worker shaking hands with one dragon hardly means an alliance, Ambassador Yuki interrupted. Though she was trying to process the implications herself, she had no idea that any humans had made contact with the legendary predator species. There is more, said the Crystalline Federation speaker, its form pulsing with worried light patterns. Our sources report that the humans spent several hours aboard the dragon's vessel, apparently providing technical assistance with advanced biotechnology. More footage appeared on the display, this time from the restaurant where Hyunwoo and Taemin had shared a meal. The sight of them sitting together, talking casually as if they were old friends, sent waves of unease through the assembled delegates. They ate together, whispered the bird-like representative. In public? And there are reports that the dragon defended the human to Station Administrator Park, added another voice. Praised his abilities and innovation. Ambassador Yuki found herself in the uncomfortable position of trying to defend actions she did not understand from a person she had never met. I fail to see why this is cause for emergency sessions. So a human fixed a dragon's ship and they had dinner. Is that really worth waking everyone up? The silence that followed this question was deep and unsettling. Finally, the oldest member of the council, a blue-scaled alien whose species had been traveling space for over 10,000 years, spoke in careful tones. Ambassador Tanaka, I do not think you fully understand what we are discussing here. Orange dragons are not simply another alien species. They are living weapons of mass destruction. A single dragon can destroy entire fleets, turn planets into dead rocks, and has been known to end civilizations that make them angry. That is concerning, Yuki admitted, but this dragon did not hurt anyone. From what I can see in the footage, it was actually quite polite. That is exactly the problem, the old alien continued. For thousands of years, the peace of the galaxy has been kept by the understanding that certain lines should not be crossed. The orange dragons exist alone, feared by all, approached by none. This arrangement has prevented countless wars and disasters. And now, added the robot representative, your species has apparently developed the ability to ignore that fear entirely. The implications began to dawn on Yuki. If humans could work with dragons, if they could form partnerships with beings that everyone else feared, then the entire structure of galactic politics might need to be reconsidered. What do you want from Earth? She asked carefully. Information, said the Crystalline Federation speaker. We need to understand how this happened, whether it can be repeated, and what it means for the stability of known space. And we need to know if there are more like him, added the bird-like alien. Other humans with this apparent immunity to appropriate terror. Meanwhile, back on Station Kepler 442, Hyunwoo was completely unaware that his actions had started a galactic political crisis. He was instead dealing with a more immediate problem, his overnight transformation from unknown maintenance worker to the most famous human in known space. His personal communicator had received over 3,000 messages in the past 12 hours. Interview requests from major news networks, marriage proposals from beings he had never heard of, and job offers from companies across the galaxy filled his inbox. The station's human resources, Department had been contacted by everyone from scientists wanting to study him to military recruiters, hoping to understand how his approach to alien relations could be turned into a weapon. Most urgently, his supervisor, Minho, had called an emergency meeting to discuss what he diplomatically called the situation. Kim, Minho said as Hyunwoo entered the maintenance office. We need to talk. The office was crowded with people who normally would never be caught dead in the maintenance section. Station Administrator Park was there, along with his deputy, the head of security, and a woman in an expensive suit who Hyunwoo recognized as a diplomatic worker from the Earth Embassy. Am I in trouble? Hyunwoo asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. That depends, Park said carefully, on what you told the Orange Dragon about station operations, human capabilities, or classified information. Classified information? I'm a maintenance worker. I do not have access to classified information. You had access to one of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, the diplomatic worker said sharply. And according to our sources, you spent several hours alone with it on its ship. His ship, Hyunwoo corrected. Taemin is a person, not an it. The correction seemed to disturb everyone in the room except Minho, who just looked tired. Kim, do you understand what you have done? I fixed a ship's air system and had dinner with someone who turned out to be more interesting than I expected. You had dinner with a creature that could turn this entire station into dust, without breaking a sweat, Park said, his voice getting louder. A being that most species consider to be the closest thing to a living god of destruction that exists in known space. He seemed pretty reasonable to me. The diplomatic worker leaned forward. Mr. Kim, I need you to understand how serious this situation is. Your actions have attracted attention from the highest levels of both human and alien governments. There are people who want to study you, recruit you, use you, or simply lock you away to prevent more incidents. Incidents? This morning, 3 major trading companies changed their shipping routes to avoid areas where orange dragons have been seen. 2 minor conflicts that were heading toward war suddenly shifted to peaceful talks after rumors spread that humans might have dragon allies. The price of certain rare materials has changed by 40%, because traders are trying to figure out what human-dragon cooperation might mean for their supply chains. Hyunwoo stared at her. All that because I fixed someone's air conditioning? All that because you treated a force of nature like a person, Minho said quietly, and it worked. The meeting continued for another hour, with various officials trying to understand exactly what had happened and what it might mean going forward. Hyunwoo answered their questions as best he could, but he kept coming back to the same basic point. He had met someone who needed help and he had helped them. The fact that the person happened to be a legendary predator did not seem relevant to him. By the time the officials finally left, Hyunwoo was exhausted and more than a little overwhelmed. The simple life of a maintenance worker was looking very appealing compared to being the center of a galactic political incident. What happens now? He asked Minho. Now? Now you go back to work and we all pretend that this is normal until we figure out what normal looks like anymore. As Hyunwoo returned to his usual duties, he could not help but notice the changes around him. Other workers watched him with a mixture of awe and nervousness. Aliens who had previously ignored him now followed his movements with careful attention. Even the station's computer systems seemed to respond to him differently, as if his newfound fame had somehow changed his security clearances. He was in the middle of fixing a bird-like alien's navigation computer when his personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. The sender ID made him smile. It was from Taemin. The message was simple. Thank you for an enjoyable evening. Would you be interested in continuing our conversation tomorrow? I find myself curious about human perspectives on space navigation. Hyunwoo typed back. Sure, same time. I look forward to it. As he put away his communicator and returned to work, Hyunwoo thought about how much his life had changed in just 2 days. He was still the same person, still doing the same job, still approaching problems with the same basic philosophy of figuring things out as he went along. But apparently, that approach had consequences he was only beginning to understand. The galaxy was watching, and everything was about to change. The second meeting between Hyunwoo and Taemin took place in the Dragon's ship, away from the watching eyes and recording devices that had made their restaurant dinner feel like a public show. Word had spread throughout the station that the human and the dragon were meeting again, and the docking bay was once more filled with curious watchers keeping what they thought were safe distances. Inside the ship's main navigation room, Taemin was explaining the principles behind dragon ship flying while Hyunwoo studied the biomechanical controls with fascination. Traditional navigation relies on predetermined routes and established safety rules, the dragon was saying. Our ships are designed to respond to intuition and emotional state as much as computer analysis. That sounds incredibly dangerous, Hyunwoo observed, running his hand along a control surface that felt warm and seemed to pulse in response to his touch. It can be, but it also allows for solutions that purely logical systems might miss. Taemin pointed toward a display showing current star maps. For instance, when faced with a navigation hazard, most ships would calculate alternative routes based on fuel efficiency and time requirements. Our vessels might choose a path that feels correct, even if it appears less efficient by normal standards. And that works, more often than you might expect. The galaxy is far more complex than most navigation systems can account for. Sometimes survival requires making choices based on incomplete information and trusting instincts over calculations. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. Humans do something similar, actually. We call it gut feeling or intuition. When we do not have enough data to make a logical choice, we go with whatever feels right. Exactly. Taemin's eyes brightened with enthusiasm. Most species find this approach unsettling. They prefer certainty over intuition, even when certainty is impossible to achieve. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communication systems. The display showed an incoming message from what appeared to be an official government vessel. "Orange Dragon Taemin," said a formal voice. "This is Admiral Jung-suk of the Terran Defense Fleet. I request permission to come aboard for a diplomatic discussion." Taemin and Hyunwoo looked at each other. "I was not expecting military involvement," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Nor was I. But your species appears to have attracted attention from several quarters." Taemin turned on the communication system. "Permission granted, Admiral. Docking Bay 2 is available." 20 minutes later, Admiral Jung-suk arrived with a small diplomatic team. She was a woman in her 50s with the bearing of someone used to command, and she carried herself with the careful confidence of someone who was trying very hard not to show how out of her depth she felt. "Admiral," Taemin greeted her with formal courtesy. "Welcome aboard my vessel." "Thank you for receiving us," Jung-suk replied, her eyes taking in the organic curves of the ship's interior with barely hidden amazement. "I apologize for the unexpected visit, but recent developments have made this conversation necessary." She turned to Hyunwoo with an expression that mixed frustration, curiosity, and something that might have been pride. "Mr. Kim, you have managed to accomplish something that human diplomacy has been trying to achieve for 15 years. "I have?" "You have established meaningful contact with a species that was previously considered completely unreachable. The implications for human standing in the galactic community are significant." Taemin's head tilted slightly. "I take it that other species have noticed our interactions." The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council was held at 3 in the morning, Jung-suk confirmed. "Every major civilization is trying to understand what human-dragon cooperation might mean for the balance of power in known space." "Cooperation?" Hyunwoo looked between the Admiral and the dragon. "We just had dinner and talked about spaceship maintenance." "Mr. Kim," Jung-suk said patiently, "when a member of the most feared species in the galaxy publicly endorses a human's technical skills, other civilizations take notice. When that same dragon spends multiple evenings in conversation with a human, they start to wonder if humanity has capabilities they had not previously recognized." The conversation that followed was unlike anything in recorded diplomatic history. Rather than formal negotiations between official representatives, it was a three-way discussion between friends trying to understand the implications of their friendship. Hyunwoo found himself in the strange position of being a translator between two very different worldviews. Admiral Jung-suk approached the situation from a military and political perspective, seeing opportunities and threats that needed to be managed through careful planning and official protocols. Taemin, meanwhile, was interested in the personal and philosophical aspects of their interaction, viewing it as a fascinating example of how different species could find common ground, despite vastly different backgrounds. "The thing is," Hyunwoo said at one point, I do not think this is really about dragons and humans at all. It is about fear and how different species deal with it. Both Young-suk and Tae-min looked at him expectantly. Most aliens are afraid of dragons because they have been taught to be afraid, he continued. And dragons maintain that fear because it is useful. But humans are new enough that we do not have those learned responses yet. We approach dragons the same way we approach any other species, as individuals who might be interesting to talk with. You are suggesting that fear itself is the barrier to communication? Young-suk asked. I am suggesting that fear makes it harder to see people as people instead of as threats or opportunities. Tae-min was quiet for a long moment. In all my centuries of existence, I have had meaningful conversations with perhaps a dozen beings who were not of my own species. Most interactions are dominated by terror, formal protocol, or attempts to gain some advantage from our feared reputation. But humans do not respond that way, Jung-suk said. Beginning to understand this human does not respond that way, Tae-min corrected gently. I cannot speak for your entire species based on one individual. They talked for several more hours, exploring the philosophical, practical, and political implications of interspecies communication without the barrier of inherited fear. By the time Admiral Young-suk prepared to leave, all three of them had gained new perspectives on their own species and their place in the galaxy. Their discussion was suddenly interrupted by an emergency alert from the station's communication system. Administrator Park's voice echoed through the ship's corridors with urgent news. Attention all residents and visitors. We have received word that a crystalline research vessel has suffered critical systems failure in the Helix Nebula. They are requesting immediate assistance, but conventional rescue operations would take 48 hours to reach them. The crew has approximately 6 hours of life support remaining. Taemin's eyes blazed with sudden intensity. The Helix Nebula is where my ship experienced its environmental distress. The energy patterns there are complex and dangerous, but you know how to navigate them safely, Hyunwoo said, understanding immediately where his friend's thoughts were. Leading? Yes. And with human technical expertise to adapt the rescue protocols on Taemin. Was already moving toward the ship's control systems. We could reach them in 3 hours instead of 48. You understand how to communicate with distress systems better than anyone I have met. If their ship is experiencing environmental failures in the nebula's energy fields, they will need both dragon navigation and human problem-solving. Admiral Jung-suk looked between them with growing amazement. You are talking about launching an unauthorized rescue mission into one of the most dangerous regions of local space. We are talking about saving lives, Taemin replied simply. I am in, Hyunwoo said without hesitation. The next few hours would become the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. Taemin's ship, guided by dragon instincts and human adaptability, successfully navigated the treacherous energy storms of the Helix Nebula to reach the stranded crystalline vessel. Hyunwoo's ability to calm and repair the ship's panicked biomechanical systems, combined with Taemin's knowledge of nebular navigation, saved all 17 crew members. But more than that, it demonstrated to the watching galaxy that human-dragon cooperation was not just intellectually interesting. It was practically revolutionary. The rescue operation was broadcast throughout known space, showing beings from multiple species working together in ways that had previously been considered impossible. The sight of a human and a dragon coordinating their efforts to save lives challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies relations. I think, Taemin said as they watched the rescued crystalline beings transferred to medical facilities, that we may have started something larger than either of us anticipated. Is that good or bad? I suppose we will find out together. The second meeting between Hyunwoo and Taemin took place in the Dragon's ship, away from the watching eyes and recording devices that had made their restaurant dinner feel like a public show. Word had spread throughout the station that the human and the dragon were meeting again, and the docking bay was once more filled with curious watchers keeping what they thought were safe distances. Inside the ship's main navigation room, Taemin was explaining the principles behind dragon ship flying while Hyunwoo studied the biomechanical controls with fascination. Traditional navigation relies on predetermined routes and established safety rules, the dragon was saying. Our ships are designed to respond to intuition and emotional state as much as computer analysis. That sounds incredibly dangerous, Hyunwoo observed. running his hand along a control surface that felt warm and seemed to pulse in response to his touch. It can be, but it also allows for solutions that purely logical systems might miss. Taemin pointed toward a display showing current star maps. For instance, when faced with a navigation hazard, most ships would calculate alternative routes based on fuel efficiency and time requirements. Our vessels might choose a path that feels correct, even if it appears less efficient by normal standards. And that works, more often than you might expect. The galaxy is far more complex than most navigation systems can account for. Sometimes survival requires making choices based on incomplete information and trusting instincts over calculations. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. Humans do something similar, actually. We call it gut feeling or intuition. When we do not have enough data to make a logical choice, we go with whatever feels right. Exactly. Taemin's eyes brightened with enthusiasm. Most species find this approach unsettling. They prefer certainty over intuition, even when certainty is impossible to achieve. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's communication systems. The display showed an incoming message from what appeared to be an official government vessel. "Orange Dragon Taemin," said a formal voice. "This is Admiral Jung-suk of the Terran Defense Fleet. I request permission to come aboard for a diplomatic discussion." Taemin and Hyunwoo looked at each other. "I was not expecting military involvement," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Nor was I. But your species appears to have attracted attention from several quarters." Taemin turned on the communication system. "Permission granted, Admiral. Docking Bay 2 is available." 20 minutes later, Admiral Jung-suk arrived with a small diplomatic team. She was a woman in her 50s with the bearing of someone used to command, and she carried herself with the careful confidence of someone who was trying very hard not to show how out of her depth she felt. "Admiral," Taemin greeted her with formal courtesy. "Welcome aboard my vessel." "Thank you for receiving us," Jung-suk replied, her eyes taking in the organic curves of the ship's interior with barely hidden amazement. "I apologize for the unexpected visit, but recent developments have made this conversation necessary." She turned to Hyunwoo with an expression that mixed frustration, curiosity, and something that might have been pride. "Mr. Kim, you have managed to accomplish something that human diplomacy has been trying to achieve for 15 years. "I have?" "You have established meaningful contact with a species that was previously considered completely unreachable. The implications for human standing in the galactic community are significant." Taemin's head tilted slightly. "I take it that other species have noticed our interactions." The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council was held at 3 in the morning, Jung-suk confirmed. "Every major civilization is trying to understand what human-dragon cooperation might mean for the balance of power in known space." "Cooperation?" Hyunwoo looked between the Admiral and the Dragon. "We just had dinner and talked about spaceship maintenance." "Mr. Kim," Jung-suk said patiently, "when a member of the most feared species in the galaxy publicly endorses a human's technical skills, other civilizations take notice. When that same dragon spends multiple evenings in conversation with a human, they start to wonder if humanity has capabilities they had not previously recognized." The conversation that followed was unlike anything in recorded diplomatic history. Rather than formal negotiations between official representatives, it was a three-way discussion between friends trying to understand the implications of their friendship. Hyunwoo found himself in the strange position of being a translator between two very different worldviews. Admiral Jung-suk approached the situation from a military and political perspective, seeing opportunities and threats that needed to be managed through careful planning and official protocols. Taemin, meanwhile, was interested in the personal and philosophical aspects of their interaction, viewing it as a fascinating example of how different species could find common ground despite vastly different backgrounds. "The thing is," Hyunwoo said at one point, "I do not think this is really about dragons and humans at all. It is about fear and how different species deal with it." Both Jung-suk and Taemin looked at him expectantly. "Most aliens are afraid of dragons because they have been taught to be afraid," he continued. "And dragons maintain that fear because it is useful. But humans are new enough that we do not have those learned responses yet. We approach dragons the same way we approach any other species, as individuals who might be interesting to talk with." "You are suggesting that fear itself is the barrier to communication?" Jung-suk asked. I am suggesting that fear makes it harder to see people as people instead of as threats or opportunities. Tae-min was quiet for a long moment. In all my centuries of existence, I have had meaningful conversations with perhaps a dozen beings who were not of my own species. Most interactions are dominated by terror, formal protocol, or attempts to gain some advantage from our feared reputation. But humans do not respond that way, Jung-suk said. Beginning to understand this human does not respond that way, Tae-min corrected gently. I cannot speak for your entire species based on one individual. They talked for several more hours, exploring the philosophical, practical, and political implications of interspecies communication without the barrier of inherited fear. By the time Admiral Jung-suk prepared to leave, all three of them had gained new perspectives on their own species and their place in the galaxy. Their discussion was suddenly interrupted by an emergency alert from the station's communication system. Administrator Park's voice echoed through the ship's corridors with urgent news. Attention all residents and visitors. We have received word that a crystalline research vessel has suffered critical systems failure in the Helix Nebula. They are requesting immediate assistance, but conventional rescue operations would take 48 hours to reach them. The crew has approximately 6 hours of life support remaining. Taemin's eyes blazed with sudden intensity. The Helix Nebula is where my ship experienced its environmental distress. The energy patterns there are complex and dangerous, but you know how to navigate them safely, Hyunwoo said, understanding immediately where his friend's thoughts were. Leading, yes, and with human technical expertise to adapt the rescue protocols on Daemin, was already moving toward the ship's control systems. We could reach them in 3 hours instead of 48. You understand how to communicate with distressed systems better than anyone I have met. If their ship is experiencing environmental failures in the nebula's energy fields, they will need both dragon navigation and human problem-solving. Admiral Jung-suk looked between them with growing amazement. You are talking about launching an unauthorized rescue mission into one of the most dangerous regions of local space. We are talking about saving lives, Taemin replied simply. I am in, Hyunwoo said without hesitation. The next few hours would become the stuff of legend throughout the galaxy. Taemin's ship, guided by dragon instincts and human adaptability, successfully navigated the treacherous energy storms of the Helix Nebula to reach the stranded crystalline vessel. Hyunwoo's ability to calm and repair the ship's panicked biomechanical systems, combined with Taemin's knowledge of nebular navigation, saved all 17 crew members. But more than that, it demonstrated to the watching galaxy that human-dragon cooperation was not just intellectually interesting. It was practically revolutionary. The rescue operation was broadcast throughout known space, showing beings from multiple species working together in ways that had previously been considered impossible. The sight of a human and a dragon coordinating their efforts to save lives challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies relations. I think, Taemin said as they watched the rescued crystalline beings transferred to medical facilities, that we may have started something larger than either of us anticipated. Is that good or bad? I suppose we will find out together.